you have reached the deepest depths of the internet. If it is greatness you seek, you've come to the wrong show. If it's about not wasting time, don't worry, you're never going to get your time back. If it's knowledge you seek, just be aware, any knowledge gained here is going to be minuscule. So now it's time for Accost the Field with Tony Gerdeman on the Ozone Radio Network.
Hello everybody, welcome to Accost the Field. I am Tony Gerdeman, here as always with Tom Orr and our producer Shannon Summers. Shannon, how goes it today?
Doing great, TGIF.
TGIF indeed. Tom, are you TGIFing?
I am. I'm looking forward to a new episode of Family Matters later tonight. Can't wait.
I'm excited about the Full House cliffhanger from last week. Is Jesse going to get that haircut?
Oh, man. Aunt Becky's going to be so mad if he does.
I didn't watch those shows, so I totally did not watch them. I don't understand any of your references.
Why? They're so topical. I don't understand.
All right, everybody. Thank you all for joining us this week. I hope you enjoyed the NFL draft special that we did for Wednesday. Tons of good information there from Kyle Morgan. And also tons of good information from me and Tom. Right, Tom?
Tons of good information from Kyle Morgan. and Shannon didn't talk very much. So, I mean, it was, I would say, our best episode yet.
Right. No garbage in, all good stuff out. But seriously, Shannon, go ahead.
And we go downhill now.
Yes. Gosh, now we are at the end of spring football. There's nothing to talk about anymore, other than the fact that spring football is concluded, and there are still plenty of questions. We've had some transfers. Right before we sat down to start recording, we got the news that Ohio State basketball has a new graduate transfer from Wake Forest point guard Keyshawn Woods. So that's very welcome. They definitely needed that. Gives CJ Jackson some help where they need it, and that should be the final grad transfer. Chris Altman had talked earlier about maybe bringing two guys in, and most recently said it would just be one. So that's where they stand, and that's a good guy to get, like 12-point per game scorer. Not necessarily the distributor that I expected he should be. Maybe 2 or 3 assists a game. But Tom, it's at least it had to happen. They needed to get somebody. They got somebody.
That was certainly like the number one position of need for them coming into the off season. So yeah, I mean that fills, I think the biggest hole they had, and sort of solidifies them as, okay, once again, this is not going to be a disaster next year. Like it could be pretty decent. They need, replacing Keita Bates-Diop is not going to be easy, but they should have a pretty respectable season next year. The thing that I thought was kind of interesting about him is you've now brought in 2 point guards this offseason, and both were kind of low assist guys at their old schools. So is that some kind of a strategic decision, or is that just sort of how it fell? Is that some indicative of how he maybe thinks they want to play stylistically, or is that just sort of, well, these are the kind of these are the guys we got, and we'll make them work within what we want to do?
Yeah, Chris Holtman kind of doesn't necessarily believe in like positions, because he's talked about that before. Where we've seen Andre Weston play center defensively, and the way he likes to spread the floor, they don't necessarily need a guy that breaks people down. Of course, he's never had that guy at Ohio State, so that's maybe part of that as well. But if you're getting 2 or 3 assists from multiple guys, then you don't necessarily need that one distributor. Although he'd certainly taken it, and might have to wait until it's like 2000 and 21 or whatever with Scooty Penn's kid. He'll eventually get there, but for right now, C.J. Jackson as a combo guard, Keyshawn Woods doing that as well. You get some more ball handling and ball movement. I think it's the ball movement more than anything, sort of like a Wisconsin thing where the ball's always moving, so it's not just one guy getting the situation going. So it's definitely a plus, and gives them some hope in so much as that it's not just all on C.J. Jackson, which would have been bad news. So while we're talking about transfers, Matt Burrell and Antonio Williams have left the program. Matt Burrell surprised me, Tom, but I guess it shouldn't have, considering how quickly he got passed by Josh Myers at center. And so there's no room for a fourth-year guy. Not that there's no room, even though there was no room for him. But you're a fourth-year guy. You are now the number 3 center. You just got passed by a redshirt freshman. There's six guards who have passed you by as well. And even though you're probably good enough to play at Ohio State if it ever got to you, it didn't look like it was ever going to happen. And he's had opportunities to win jobs, had an opportunity this offseason and in the spring to win the center job, and he was just left in the dust by Brady Taylor and Josh Myers, and so now he will leave. I think last week we talked about possible transfers. I had 6 guys circled, and he wasn't one. But looking back on it, Tom, it makes pretty good sense.
It absolutely does. I mean, yeah, I also had a list of, I think I said last week, I've got a list of 6 guys, and I've got a pretty good sense that the 3 guys who transfer are going to be on this list of 6. And 2 guys transferred this week, and neither of them was on my list of 6. But Burrell absolutely fits the profile of the guy who transfers. And, I mean, like you said, it makes total sense because, they started spring ball with him. He was going to be at center, and then he wasn't practicing at the beginning of spring, the first time we got to watch. The second time, I think we saw him maybe a little bit at center. And then I don't know that he played much, if any, center in the spring game, and no one really talked about him. And it just kind of was like, yeah, he also is here. And I mean, if you're getting passed by a redshirt freshman, there's a ton of depth at guard. He has had opportunities, like you said. I mean, wasn't he when Brandon Bowen broke his leg? Didn't Burrell go in for Brandon Bowen last year? And then the Maryland game? I think Burrell was the one who stepped in for Bowen,
right?
And then a week later, Demetrius Knox is starting in that position instead. So it was like he was like right there and just on the cusp of playing and never actually got a job. So, now you're far enough in, and you've got, Josh Myers has now passed you at center, and you've got some pretty highly touted guards, like Wyatt Davis, who, potentially have a chance to pass you at guard, and there's not a place for you. So he is like you said, he is absolutely capable of playing at the level of an Ohio State offensive lineman. It just never happened, and it's was starting to look like it just wasn't going to happen. So, I don't think we've heard yet where he's headed, but wherever it is, he can play at a very high level for a Power 5 team and be a very good player. So, someone's going to get a pretty good guard, but the writing on the wall was getting kind of clearer and clearer that it wasn't going to be at Ohio State.
It was funny because, you talked about your the profile that you built last week, and I was after I saw that, I don't know, thinking about the profile. I'm like, Tom, you completely missed. Like, if you were an FBI profiler, you put down the perfect profile, and then you just let the serial killer walk right out the door.
So is he like the son of Sam, or
he's Zodiac, basically?
He's Zodiac. Oh
yeah.
Man, I can't. So were you able to decipher his transfer, his tweet about transferring then? Because I couldn't make anything out of it.
But yeah, I mean, it was exactly who you said the player would be. You just forgot to name the name. And I won't go, I won't break down the fourth wall and how many times you're getting names wrong lately, Tom. Behind the scenes, we won't do that here.
Thank you, Andrew Gerderman.
But yeah, so he's gone. It doesn't really hurt them because they have players everywhere, and the other transfer, Antonio Williams, running back, who I was talking to somebody before the spring, and they were talking. I think it was after like Samson James committed, and the way that person was talking to me was like, "Yeah, Antonio Williams is transferring," but then you listen to everything he said this spring, listen to what Tony Alford said this spring, and it was like, he's enjoying being a leader in the room, and he has his role, and this and that, and this and that, and then like 2 or 3 days later, he's announcing that he's leaving for North Carolina with North Carolina athletic department graphics already, and so it feels like this had been in the works for a while. Did you notice that, Tom? The tweet that he sent out, like, it was UNC graphics. I think there may have even been a UNC head coach signature on it or whatever.
It was, yeah. A lot of times when guys announce they're transferring, it's just, I'm leaving and I'll make a decision on where I'm headed next. But I mean, like Burrell was like, yeah, I'm transferring, but it wasn't, I'm going to fill in the blank, University of Virginia or wherever he may end up. That was kind of interesting to me. Williams in January, if you'd asked me most likely players to transfer, he would have been at the top of my list. I mean, we talked about him a few months ago and said basically it's getting late early for him because he's been here longer than you think. He's one of those people that hasn't seen a ton of playing time, but he's been here 3 years already. And so he's not going to, barring some kind of serious injury to J.K. Dobbins or Mike Weber, he wasn't going to get meaningful playing time this year. Then after Weber leaves next year, you still have Dobbins. You have Master Teague, who could potentially have stolen playing time from him this year and could potentially have taken playing time from him next year. Your opportunities are very limited. He's another guy like Burrell who absolutely could have played at this level. And, we talked about him, a week ago, 2 weeks ago, where if those guys go down, if Weber or Dobbins goes down, you would feel completely comfortable with Antonio Williams being the starting running back at Ohio State, especially after what we saw this spring and after what we heard this spring. So, that's he's going to be good at North Carolina. He's going to be, potentially an impact player for them. And he could have done that at Ohio State, but just sometimes the opportunity just doesn't present itself.
I think Master Teague, if Master Teague wasn't enrolled this spring, Williams would probably still be a Buckeye. But once, you see him, and he saw him all winter long, so he knew the kind of player that was now here, and he's taking stock the entire time, and I just wonder how long ago he knew he was leaving. And it's still the fact that he was completely engaged the entire time. J.K. Dobbins thanked him on Twitter, for always being a leader of the room, and I think Master Teague did as well. That North Carolina is getting a pretty good person along with that, because anytime we've ever talked to him, he touched the ball very sparingly, but he was always upbeat, always like probably one of the most upbeat guys that we talked to, and he didn't have like the production to that mirrors his attitude. So Shannon, North Carolina is getting a good player and also a good team guy.
Yeah, definitely they are. With the way they were talking about his leadership and everything this past spring, I was actually kind of shocked to see him leaving I mean, like you guys were saying, being behind Master Teague and everything like that, he had a very productive spring. He looked good. And, I mean, nothing but the best for him at North Carolina.
Tom, do you think he'd still be a Buckeye if Teague wasn't here yet?
There's a pretty good chance because, everyone looks good on their high school highlight film, but then a lot of them show up and it's like, oh, okay, this is a different level. Teague, this spring, from very early in spring ball, or, we the little bits that we saw was like, yeah, that guy fits right in here. And then, during the spring game, he obviously is extremely capable of playing at this level. Even when there was two-hand touch, he rushed for 6 yards a carry or something like that. And he is physically developed. There was a picture of him that I took of him next to Elijah Gardner, the backup wide receiver who's a redshirt freshman. And Teague, Gardner is a fairly thin guy, but he's been in the strength program for a year. Teague should still be in high school and just is incredibly bulked up, just a very big, solidly built kid who very obviously can make an immediate impact here. So, I would say for sure that had to play a role, because once you see the the guy coming up behind you, and see he's not going to take a year of redshirting to be ready to play. He's ready to go right now. That has to, that's going to chip into your playing time, and he already wasn't looking at a ton of playing time. So I would say for sure that had to play a role.
Now, Tom, this picture, are you sure I did not? Are you sure I didn't take that picture?
Nobody said it was a great picture, so this isn't one you want to steal credit for.
That's right. Yeah, that was your picture. I remember it now. So I went back and looked at the freshman running backs under Urban Meyer, what they rush for as freshmen. And it's skewed everywhere from, Antonio Williams, 28 yards as a true freshman, to J.K. Dobbins, 1,403 yards as a true freshman. But what it all comes down to, on average, a true freshman running back under Urban Meyer at Ohio State rushes for 413 yards. So let's put the over-under on 413 yards for Master Teague this year. Shannon, you going over or under that?
I'm going to go slightly, just slightly under.
Tom?
Oh, I was so ready to say under, and then Shannon said under, and now... See, I went through and looked at some of the individual numbers as well, and it's like Dontre Wilson, 250 yards, Curtis Samuel, 383 yards, Ezekiel Elliott, 262 yards. So, I mean, I think that the numbers from like Dobbins skew it and just enough that I'd go under. I think you could set his over under maybe right about where Antonio Williams was last year, which was 57 carries, 290 yards, 3 touchdowns. I would give him more like, 60, 65 carries, 350 yards, 5 touchdowns, something like that. I think he would be under 400, but between 300 and 400, I think is a pretty good target for him.
Yeah, I'm with you guys. I was maybe slotting it between a 383 from Curtis Samuel and a 262 from Zeke. And what neither of those guys had was, 2 1,000-yard rushers in front of them, although they sort of did when you consider the quarterback. So I think in order to get that 413 yards, he's going to need like at least one 70-yarder mixed in. And, he does play Rutgers. So...
I can't wait to miss the opportunity to shoot video of him scoring a 70-yard touchdown against Rutgers, as is tradition.
I wasn't even thinking about that. I'm sorry. Shannon definitely was thinking about that, though.
Don't know what you're talking about.
We got to talk to Tony Alford. Well, last week on Wednesday, all 10 of the assistant coaches minus Zach Smith talked to us for 10 or 20 minutes, and Tony Alford was pretty high on Brian Snead as well. And I know there are people who are higher on Snead than Teague, and even after having seen Teague, they're still mighty high on Snead. and we've got plenty of time to talk about this during the off season, maybe every single week. I don't know where the carries are for him, Tom, especially seeing what Teague was capable of, and when on Wednesday's show, when Kyle Morgan guaranteed, very emphatically guaranteed that this is DeMario McCall's last year because he's going to light it up.
Yeah, I don't know where Snead gets the carries, because if you look at his highlights, he looks like the kind of guy that could come in and play as a true freshman. But I don't know if it makes sense to burn a year when he's basically just going to be playing special teams, because there's between Dobbins, Weber, Teague, McCall, and if one of the other things Kyle said was he was pretty confident that it was going to be Burrow, so there's more quarterback running to take more carries. I don't know that you're gonna. I don't know that it makes sense to burn a year when he's going to have 17 carries or whatever it might be on the year. He is someone who absolutely is underrated by a lot of Ohio State fans, because he had one of the quietest recruitments I can remember. He committed early, never wavered, never visited other schools. There was no drama. He didn't do interviews with people, so you didn't see the a lot of the follow-up interviews that a lot of the recruits do. He just was very low-key, knew where he wanted to go, verbaled, signed there, and that was it. It was a very simple, quiet process. So he's kind of one of those forgotten players in this class, although based on where his recruiting rankings are, he shouldn't be. He's one of the best running backs in the country.
Yeah, I'm looking forward to seeing what he does, and I know Tony Alford is as well. You mentioned Burrow, and that's where I want to go to next, because Ryan Day, the quarterback coach, offensive coordinator, Urban Meyer earlier in the spring said, "Yeah, our timeline is going to incorporate Joe Burrow's timeline in terms of we want to let him know where things stand." And Day on Wednesday was basically like, we have until September to know who our starting quarterback is. And it almost felt like there's some annoyance, or don't rush me, or I don't know. Maybe it was probably all just coach speak, because they also hadn't yet gone through all of the film and the data or whatever, all of the things they need to go through to figure out who the starting quarterback is. But Tom, it felt like we're going to move at the pace we're going to move, and we'll know it when we know it, and that's that.
I don't want to shatter anyone's illusions, but every once in a great while, I get the sense that we're not necessarily being told exactly what the coaches think about any given matter at any given time. I'm not calling anyone a liar. I'm just saying that perhaps we might not be given the entire picture at any given moment. I think that, first of all, if he says, yep, we need to have a decision by May 1st because he's going to graduate on May 6th, and he has to know, then on May 1st, everyone's going to be yelling and screaming and wanting to know what the decision is. So now it can come out on whatever timetable they want it to come out on, because we don't have any scheduled availabilities with anyone until Big Ten Media Days in Chicago in 90 days or so. So, now it can come out whenever they want it to come out, and there's not a huge artificial date that's being put on it that everyone on the outside knows about it. Joe Burrow knows what his timetable is. Joe Burrow's parents know what their timetable is. And I'm sure they've communicated that to the Ohio State coaching staff. So I'm sure the information will be communicated in a timely manner based on that timetable.
Shannon, are you buying this crap that Tom is saying that coaches aren't forthcoming?
Well, he's always wanting to stir up some kind of hate and just some. He wants to create strife within the program just so he can enjoy himself. But yeah, no, I don't think there's strife going on here.
Yeah, Tom, I can tell you got something to say. Go ahead.
I think that Burrow probably has his plan Bs in mind already, and he probably knows what he needs to hear or not hear in order to stay or to go. So, I think they're going to, if they give him an answer anytime by early May, like that's going to be plenty of time, because there are going to be schools that, he basically has to be, have a decision made before summer semester starts at Ohio State is, I think, basically the timetable that he's going to grad transfer before then. So he has time. There's not a huge rush. I would be. I mean, we've talked about this a lot over the last few weeks, obviously, because it's all anyone in Columbus is talking about, basically. I would be fairly surprised if he wasn't told that he was at least ahead right now. Because if he's, keeping him around is, Urban Meyer's number one goal is what's in the best interest of the program. Keeping Joe Burrow in the program is in the best interest of the program. Joe Burrow has played well enough that I think you could very legitimately, just purely on merit, say he's ahead right now. As Kyle Morgan said on our Wednesday show, he fits Urban Meyer's offense that is the, quote-unquote Urban Meyer offense, the offense that Urban Meyer loves to run and has run everywhere he's coached. He fits that better than Haskins does. So I would be, at this point, I would be pretty surprised if the answer was not, Joe Burrow is ahead right now. We're not guaranteeing you the starting job, but you are going into fall camp as our number one quarterback.
And I would assume that has already been expressed to him. And what the other thing that Ryan Day said, well, not the, one of the other things was you still have to win it in camp. Doesn't matter who the starting quarterback is right now, or who the 1A and 1B or 1 and 2 is. It all changes in camp because you still have to prove it there. That's where the job is going to be won when it's this close. So there is absolutely no harm in telling him, especially if it's true, right now you are ahead, but it's Ohio State, there are no guarantees. But also, this is Ohio State, there are no guarantees. He knows that. So now it just becomes, where does he feel his best opportunity to start is? And he had a good spring, very good spring. You expect that he would continue to progress. Is his fall going to be good enough to win the job? I don't know, but I would be shocked if they would come out and say, yeah, it just doesn't look like it's going to happen for you here. That would make no sense.
And that's what we've been saying from basically day one, that, Urban said, well, he owes Joe Burrow an answer, basically as soon as spring ball's over. But, at that point we said, I mean, what are the odds that he says, well, it's too close to call, or, yep, you're ahead. I mean, like that is the safe answer to give, and I think based on what we've seen, I think that's a reasonable answer. So I would be honestly pretty floored if that wasn't the answer.
And the ball is in Joe Burrow's court. You didn't chase him away. You told him what you thought he wanted to hear, and not because you thought that he wanted to hear that, but you told him something that was positive. And then he still decided, well, I still want to do this. So it's you definitely gave him the option to stick around, but ultimately it's going to be his decision. Even you can't guarantee a job at this point, especially when there are talented people competing. So when we wonder what does he need to hear, maybe we are forgetting that he doesn't need to hear that he's the starter, or I don't know, maybe he does. It would be odd to think that you have to be guaranteed anything when that's just not, Shannon. That's not how Ohio State works.
I'm sorry, I wasn't even paying attention to that one, so we'll just go ahead and skip me.
Perfect. It would be like, Tom, it would be like, renting a car at Enterprise and being like, I want a flying car, and if I don't get a flying car, I'm going to transfer to Nebraska. Ohio State doesn't guarantee stuff. They don't have flying cars.
Will they pick me up if I can't get to their
yes.
office? Okay. Well, I mean, you know what? That might be an extra benefit unless they will pick any student up. So we have to be careful about that.
They will not pick you up in a flying car.
Okay. Yeah. If you are going into this and saying, I need to be guaranteed the starting job, then you've already made up your mind that you're leaving, because that's not something that they do. I mean, and I would certainly assume that Joe Burrow has been around the program long enough to know that that's not something they do, and therefore Joe Burrow is probably not looking for that to be the answer that he gets. You mentioned Nebraska, and we've talked about this a couple times and sort of gone back and forth on, can they block him, can't they block him? If he is a grad transfer, can Ohio State block him from going to certain schools? And they had talked about changing the rule at one point, but then they hadn't changed it. The answer is that they can block him if they want to. So if hypothetically, if Joe Burrow decided he wanted to leave, and if he decided he wanted to go to Nebraska, where he has some family ties and would obviously be a pretty intriguing fit in Scott Frost's offense, Ohio State could say, no, we're not letting you go there. Miami is doing that with one of their backup quarterbacks this year, Evan Shereffs. I'm gonna be like the Sloopcast guys and butcher the name. Evan Shereffs. He originally, they blocked him from transferring to any ACC schools and any teams on their 2018 and 2019 schedules, and he and his family appealed it, and then later they got cleared to transfer to 3 different ACC schools. So. Ohio State technically could block him from going to, say, Nebraska or Cincinnati, since they play Cincinnati next year. Or, I mean, they could block him from going basically anywhere they wanted to if they wanted to. But, there are 2 questions there. A, would they do that? And B, if they did that, Miami basically had, the court of public opinion kind of rise up against them and say, look, this is ridiculous because, you've graduated, you've done what you came here to do. It's absurd that you're now blocking me from transferring to another school just because you don't like it. So I guess the question would be, would Ohio State block it? And would Ohio State then, if public opinion turned on them, would they continue blocking it? And, this is all a purely hypothetical question because we don't know if he's transferring, where he would transfer, if Ohio State would block it, or if he could be the starting quarterback at Ohio State this fall, which is certainly what the direction I would be leaning at this point.
And I know Kyle Morgan is listening to this, just tearing his hair out because, why do we keep talking about Joe Burrow transferring when he's going to win the Heisman this year?
Kyle's not listening. We started the show talking about basketball. Kyle's not listening.
True.
He's still fast forwarding.
But I just have one quick question for this whole thing. Now, if like you were saying, public crying or whatever, outrage. What about the simple fact that the kid's been here for so long, knows all the plays and everything like that, has to play Nebraska this year, and so wouldn't that be you're just going to try to rest on the laurels of him not giving the defensive coach any kind of ammunition in order to help beat his former team? You know what I'm saying?
That's why it's so fascinating to me, and I'd love to know Urban's thoughts on that. And when the day that we were scheduled to talk to him, he didn't have time for us or whatever, because I want to know his stance on graduate transfers, because I believe that it's a legitimate concern to have a guy transfer to somebody on your schedule, but can they withstand that stance when social media blows up, when ESPN picks it up, when Outside the Line starts talking about it, because it's Ohio State, so it's going to go further than something that Miami does.
Well, Ed Warner transferred from Minnesota to Michigan this offseason. Should Minnesota have been able to block him from transferring his employment to another Big Ten conference team because they might play them in
No, because he couldn't figure out the offense when he was here.
What's ridiculous to me is, this is typical NCAA nonsense where this is nominally something that's about furthering the student athlete's academic career because their current school does not offer a graduate program in the field that they have chosen to pursue their studies. And you can't see the hand gesture I'm making right now, but you can probably imagine what it is.
No.
And so therefore, because this is all about furthering a student athlete's academic career, therefore we're able to block you from transferring due to athletic concerns. Like, okay, you can pick one. You can spout the BS about what we're all pretending this is about, or we can just acknowledge what it's all about. But you gotta kind of pick one there.
Yeah, like JT Barrett wasn't a grad transfer, but he was in graduate school, and it was an online class, like one class. And he even said, prior to 2017, he's like, yeah, now it's just all football, so it's great. So this whole grad school thing and the program, it has to be a program that you don't have at your school. So this is where we talk about the underwater basket weaving. Everybody wants to do like I think at Ohio State maybe they'll do coaching, but
everyone's going to transfer to Arizona State and major in swimming pool management, get a master's in swimming pool management.
But I understand the coach's concerns. I would just be interested to see how Ohio State played it, how Urban Meyer played it if it turned ugly. And that's why I would assume there would be conversations between Urban and Joe Burrow and his family to try to squash that, not to squash the transfer, but to say, to squash him leaving to a place that could lead to bad PR for Ohio State. And that I would think that conversation would happen, and it's not a comfortable conversation because it would be like, well, who are you to say I can't go somewhere to a specific place? And that's why Urban doesn't want to have to deal with that, and certainly doesn't want to have to answer questions about it. Not that he ever, would necessarily have to until July or whatever. But it's not something that he doesn't like having negative association with the program. Even when earlier in the season, or earlier in the spring, when somebody asked him about the 2015 quarterback competition and learning from that, and he was like, "Well, we lost one game. It went well. It didn't go well. I mean, it was an issue all season long." And you try to spin that, and I don't know that there'd be a good way to spin a guy who wants to go somewhere and you're not letting him, Tom.
Yeah, that's a pretty indefensible thing to me. I mean, I get that we draw this artificial line between student athletes and coaches and all that, but coaches have freedom of movement and have a whole lot more power in this system than the players do. So yeah, I don't have a ton of sympathy for that argument. Like if you're just going to transfer after a year, then whatever, you can, you can have to sit out a year or whatever it is. But yeah, if you've graduated and you've fulfilled your obligations, like you should just be able to go. And that shouldn't be something that people are putting restrictions on. And I think Urban Meyer for sure, he doesn't want that to be a distraction. Like he's all about just keep the focus on the football and on, don't have locker room division, don't have people worried about stuff other than the first game. We're here to focus on Oregon State. We're not here to talk about, a guy who left the program. So yeah, I think by far the most likely outcome here is Joe Burrow stays at Ohio State, starts at quarterback probably this fall, and this is all, purely hypothetical stuff that we are just using to kill 20 minutes to get through, off-season show number 2 out of 20.
What?
But what?
But you know what you said about not wanting drama or anything like that. That's one of the reasons why it wouldn't surprise me if he just let him go wherever he wanted, because it's like out of sight, out of mind. We're here. We're focused on Ohio State. We're not focused on somebody leaving for Nebraska. So it wouldn't shock me if he's like they just let him go wherever. But we've never really asked Urban what his stance is, so it may be well known that you can't go anywhere that's on the schedule because that's just it's a common sense rule. We just have never. Nobody was concerned about Kyle Trout leaving or Evan Lyle and being like, what if they would have wanted to go to Michigan State? Would you have let them?
What's really interesting is Nebraska's AD came out this week and said that Jim Harbaugh and Urban Meyer are scared of Scott Frost. He said that on Tuesday night or Tuesday during the day this week. So, if Urban, if Burrow does decide to transfer and Burrow decides to transfer to Nebraska and Urban blocks it, then that sort of feeds into that narrative a little bit, which, I mean, Ohio State has beaten Nebraska 72,000-13 the last 2 years. So I don't know how much fear there really is, but I'm not going to lie. When I saw that quote, I thought, yeah, that's probably just him, puffing up in front of a group of boosters and just, trying to get people all riled up and to write big checks. But it would be really fascinating if it came out later that they had already had this discussion about Burrow and Ohio State had blocked him, and that was sort of the genesis of that. I really don't think that's the case, but since we're just waist deep in reckless speculation in this segment anyway, I'll throw that out there now.
Maybe it's fear of complacency when it comes to games against Nebraska. You just assume it's going to be 66-3, and if you don't go out there. And you can't just throw your helmets out there and be 66-3. You might 45-7, but not, if you're going to get in the 60s, you got to really at least 3/4 asset. I think we've covered the quarterback situation enough for today. We'll talk more about it next week. Let's make a date. Put that on your calendar. Quarterback discussion. You know what? Probably tomorrow, which would be Saturday, or whenever we're done recording this, Joe Burrow's news will come out and we'll be like, crap, we just missed it. But then we get to talk about it next week, which we'll do regardless. The one of the surprises of spring for me was Josh Myers. We talked about it a little bit at the top with Matt Burrell leaving, but we didn't. I mean, we've talked about this on the show before, but the first look we got of practice, Tom, we're on the sidelines looking through all the defensive linemen and offensive linemen, and we're both like, "Is that Josh Myers at center? Is he snapping? I can't. Is that really? That's Josh Myers at center." And he picked it up really quick. I mean, Greg Studrawa said last week that he had a rough first 2 weeks, which you would expect, Tom, but really came on in the last 2 weeks, and that's what's made that position still a toss-up going into the summer and the fall.
To me, the center position is a little bit like the linebackers, where we don't know who's going to start this fall, but I don't think there's really much reason to be concerned because they were happy with Brady Taylor's level of production, and there's no indication that Brady Taylor's level of production has dropped off. So now it's just a matter of, is Josh Myers potentially going to pass the already acceptable level of production of Brady Taylor? So it seems like this is like the linebackers where, we don't know who's going to start, but we have a bunch of guys who we would be comfortable sending out there. So we'll just, when we figure out who are the best of these all acceptable options, we'll figure it out. We'll send them out there, and then we'll go from there. So I don't, this is unsettled in terms of not having a set starter coming out of spring ball, but I don't think the center position is a real big concern. Urban Meyer made it sound like that was maybe his biggest concern at the start of the spring, and I would certainly say it probably is not anywhere near the top of the list now.
Yeah, and the reason it stopped being up there is because of the way Brady Taylor was playing. And now if you've got Josh Myers catching him, I mean, now you've got double the assurance or the confidence in that position. The trajectory that he's on right now, you wonder if Brady Taylor can hold him off. But I'm also reminded of, I think it was Matt Burrell maybe last spring or the spring before that. I mean, he had that same trajectory, but the summer just killed him. I guess it would probably have been maybe, I guess, because Brandon Bowen won in 2017. One of those springs where he left the spring as the right guard and was playing well, but the summer hits and the off season hits, and then fall camp, and then you lose your spot. And one of the things that Stud said was, yeah, you can lose your spot or you can win a spot even in summer, just on the offensive line, all the work that it entails and the strength training and all of that. And it's possible that Myers could even move ahead of Brady Taylor this summer. Although I would expect Shannon, I expect both of them to play against Oregon State. You think we'll see maybe a little bit of a rotation there until we figure out, or they figure out, who their number one is for sure?
I mean, unless during training camp they see a clear-cut favorite, I definitely think that you're going to have a situation where you're putting them both in and rotating them and try to figure out who's going to be the guy to take that leadership spot.
I don't think that's a concern in terms of rotating them or giving giving Josh Myers some snap, a couple of series and then fluctuating back and forth. I don't see that as being a huge problem early on.
Probably not. You're not going to want to go through your whole season like that. But if you start out like that, and Oregon State is not a game that's probably going to go right down to the very end of the fourth quarter anyway. So you're probably going to give a whole lot of people snaps in that first game. But I wonder if maybe they have, if they're more comfortable with one of them in a run blocking role and more comfortable with the other one in more of a passing or running kind of role, maybe you kind of almost substitute him situationally. And I mean, obviously that would sort of tip things off, but my thought is, if Josh Myers, who played in a high school offense that was like a wing T offense and never pass blocked, if they're not as comfortable with him as a pass blocker, but they think he's a better run blocker, maybe he's the center when Tate Martell is in on whatever situational packages. And you're probably, Tate Martell is in, so you're already telling the defense, yep, we're probably going to be running the ball in some way here. And, maybe you do it that way if you're splitting up your snaps. And then your centers are consistently working with the same quarterbacks. And, we've talked a little bit about snapping higher or lower if guys are, 6 inches, 8 inches different in height. That's there may be absolutely nothing to that, but that just was something that when you were talking about that, this just occurred to me as like maybe one way they could potentially split up the snaps.
Like how you have to have a catcher who specializes in catching the knuckleball.
Exactly. Yeah. You need your Josh Tolley for your R.A. Dickey.
Perfect.
So you need your now. Josh Myers, I kept thinking, no, it's not Josh. It was Josh Sholey. No, it is Josh Myers. You need your Josh Myers for your Tate Martell.
I think snapping a knuckleball would be a terrible idea for a center.
Let me write that down.
Especially like Liam McCullough as a long snapper. That would be, just throw that in there and see how Drew Chrisman does catching that stuff.
Michigan tried that against Michigan State a few years ago, very late in the game. It didn't go great. Did
not go well. The other surprise on the offensive line was Thayer Munford emerging basically as a left tackle. And we saw that in the spring game where we're surprised about it. And Stud said, right now that looks like that's the way it'll be because Thayer Munford is maybe a little more comfortable on the left side. So is Joshua Allaby, who is the backup there. And so much of getting the offensive line to gel as you want it is having the young guys be comfortable. And he said, towards later in spring ball, they put Munford over there, and he really enjoyed it. He's still learning, as we saw. He's not ready for Nick Bosa yet or Chase Young, but who really is. But he's got a comfort level there, and it's not what I think is a relief for Buckeye fans, and it was good to hear. It was nothing to do with Isaiah Prince not being able to handle the position. It was more about Prince being able to play either position and Munford being a little bit more comfortable on the left side. And we talked to Isaiah Prince earlier in the spring, and he said, "Yeah, I want to be the left tackle." He had never played left tackle before, and I last week or 2 weeks ago, I asked you, Tom, like, this is the first time he's ever going to be left tackle. Is that a concern? And I think we agreed that it was a concern. So now, if it's Thayer Munford at left tackle, then maybe things are falling into place.
Yeah, I'm. This is much more of a concern for me than center or quarterback.
Yes.
Like I feel like those are all positions where it's like, yeah, they've got multiple good options. Whoever it is will be fine. The tackle situation is a little bit of a red flag to me, because if Prince wanted to play left tackle, and he could do it, then I think he would have been playing left tackle. I think I could be wrong, but I don't think you would willingly put a first-time starter at left tackle, because that's one of the. I mean, tackle is one of those places where everyone else can be doing their job, and if one tackle's having a bad night, that can blow up the whole offense. I mean, we saw it in. I mean, the example everyone immediately has in their mind is 2016 Penn State, where it was Prince, and he was a redshirt sophomore, right? And had a bad night, and they didn't give him any help, and that just short-circuited the Ohio State offense that night, and they lost the game. People took Jamarco Jones for granted, I think. I mean, we talked about him quite a bit on Wednesday with Kyle Morgan. He was just very steady. You never had to worry about him. He was just there, and he just got the job done. And I think people have forgotten, after a year with good tackle play out of both Jamarco Jones and Isaiah Prince last year, I think people have forgotten what an offense with one kind of shaky tackle looks like. So, obviously the coaches are saying all the right things right now, but first-time starter at tackle, I think, has to be kind of a red flag for people.
I don't disagree, and we put too much stock or weight on the spring game, but yeah, he did not have some. He had some bad moments. Kyle talked about this a little bit on Wednesday's show about the difficulty in moving from the right side to the left side. And it was very graphic, the analogy that he used. But suffice it to say, it's not the easiest thing to do. But this is Isaiah Prince's third year of a starter. Now he's a true senior. He's plenty experienced. But the assumption was that he would just move over to left tackle. Now that he may still, but maybe they're just more. I think they're also comfortable with him at right tackle, and I wonder if there's some things of like, you know what, he did pretty well last year. Let's not screw with this, and we really like Thayer Munford. We'll work on building him up, and build him up, and you assume that he'll be ready. But it's a lot to ask for a sophomore to start at tackle, as Isaiah Prince showed in 2016. We said before, Jamarco Jones couldn't do it. Taylor Decker was able to do it, but he did not look great early on. It's a tough ask for a sophomore. So we'll see if Thayer Munford can do it. You'd mentioned the linebackers. We don't have to talk too much about the linebackers because really there's not a whole lot to talk about other than Billy Davis said he doesn't have really a top two, or he doesn't have a pecking order. And not only does he not have really a pecking order, but all of the outside linebackers are interchangeable. At middle linebacker, Justin Hilliard and Baron Browning are tied. They won't stay tied once Tuff Borland gets in. Who knows how that's going to work out. So there's just so many variables. I don't know that that's more of a summer project or a summer topic. When we need something to talk about, we can manufacture something there. But really, there's really nothing to talk about at linebacker other than, there's a bunch of players and nobody's concerned. It's sort of like you're mentioning it as center.
Yeah, you just kind of hand wave it like, we don't know, but it'll be fine. Like they'll figure it out. They have the pieces there. They have guys who can play inside. They have guys who can play outside. They have, guys who can play both positions. And right now Borland's hurt, so they need to have someone who to plug the middle. That could be Baron Browning. That could be Justin Hilliard. It'll be fine. One of those guys, if it's Hilliard in the middle, then Browning could slide out to the will. But if he doesn't, then Keandre Jones is probably fine at the will, and Malik Harrison's fine at the Sam, and Pete Warner's fine at the Sam, and it'll be fine. Like it's Ohio State football fans, so everyone in Columbus, I'm sure, will push the panic button on this at some point, but it'll be fine. It'll be fine. Don't worry about it.
I think last week's show, there were a couple of commitments, and we had a couple more commitments this week in. Jake Ray, the 2020 offensive lineman, younger brother of current freshman Max Ray. Jake Ray, really the rankings for 2020 it's basically just 24/7. Nobody else is ranking anybody right now, but he's top 10, top 15 ranked tackle, but offers from every major college football power that you would expect and want to see, offering a guy that you just got committed to you. This was pretty much a no-brainer. Nobody had any doubts that he would end up at Ohio State. Max Ray was hoping he would, and they had talked frequently about what Ohio State was like. And so, like, every step of the way that Max Ray was being recruited by Ohio State, his brother Jake was there as well. The family was there through it all. So this was always felt like it was going to happen. And it's a good start to the 2020 class. He's the first guy in that class. The first commit of the past 7 days was Steele Chambers, which linebacker, running back. He wants to play running back, Tom, and I like him better on defense, but he's like 6'2", 215, and I could foresee like him becoming maybe like a jumbo H-back. Sort of, Urban Meyer sort of had it at Florida with like a Trey Burton, I think, like a bigger guy who can do some different things. Sort of, and also like when Jalen Hurd was transferring from Tennessee, there was some thought that maybe Ohio State could use him in that vein as well.
Yeah, Steele Chambers is a really interesting player because he could. You look at his film and it's like, oh yeah, he could be a pretty good running back, and you look at his defensive film, it's like, oh yeah, he'd be a really good linebacker. And then, I mean, like you said, yeah, he could play. He could just sort of be like your matchup problem guy, where. Right. Okay, you're used to defending us with a, short, speedy guy like Paris Campbell there. Okay, now he's 6'2", and he's built like a ton of bricks. So good luck with that. He seems like, I would guess, if I had to guess right now, I guess he at least starts in the running back room. You're sort of reading tea leaves there a little bit with Devin Ford, who's a 5-star running back in the 2019 class, who was scheduled to visit Ohio State and then canceled his visit immediately after Steele Chambers committed. So, there's a little bit of reading tea leaves there, and maybe that's Ohio State, said that they were recruiting him there. Maybe that's other schools saying, oh, see, they've already got 2 running backs in the class. They don't even have room for you. And sort of a negative recruiting thing. So you're sort of guessing to some degree, but that's where I would at least see him starting. But I mean, with guys like DeMario McCall, we've seen they are not shy about bouncing people back and forth between H and the running back room. So starting at running back does not mean that you stay there.
We're talking about a big kid. I just thinking back to Noah Brown when he was in high school. he ran the ball a lot, and I remember thinking at that time maybe he could be like a big H back, and maybe that's what Steel Chambers can become. Now we know Devin Ford is sort of backing away from Ohio State. Noah Kane, who is another high 4-star, 5-star running back at IMG, who Ohio State's in on, basically he said, it doesn't matter who's there. I'm not afraid of competition. I know how good I am. Was the essence of what he's saying. So wherever he'll go, wherever he could still end up at Ohio State, wherever he goes, he knows there's going to be competition, but he also believes he's good enough to play in front of pretty much anybody. With Steel Chambers, obviously the name is a good football name. There are other good football names out there, like Gunnar Kiel is a good name for a quarterback. Tuff Borland, a good name for a linebacker. There's a quarterback at Louisville who's probably going to be taking over for Lamar Jackson, Juwan Pass. And so I wondered if we could come up with any good names. Did anybody do some homework? Did you guys come up with a good football name that maybe down the road could become like if Ohio State was to recruit this person, this would be a good name to recruit?
Any quarterback named Armstrong, I think, would be your number one contender. The best name overall in college football right now is lineman at Illinois State in FCS, whose name is Kobe Buffalo Meat. That's my personal favorite right now. Eastern Michigan had a defensive end named Lion King, like the movie Lion King, a couple of years ago. So, but yeah, I meant to look whether there had ever been a quarterback named Armstrong who played major college football. I'm sure there probably has, and whoever that is, he's your winner.
Didn't Nebraska just have an Armstrong?
Oh yeah, Tommy Armstrong, of course. Yeah, there you go. Tommy Armstrong, there's your winner.
He wasn't much of a winner though.
Well,
I was thinking like a guy named like Trench Blockwell, would be like from birth, like the parents are feeding him mayonnaise sandwiches to build him into an interior offensive lineman.
Just as you said, mayonnaise sandwiches, and I'm just immediately picturing LSU defensive linemen. I don't know why. It just popped into my head, like how they just pump 350-pound guys off an assembly line down there.
Running low on mayonnaise sandwiches. Shannon, before we get to All or Nothing, did you have any football names you wanted to throw in there?
Just one, North-South Runner.
What if he's like a scat back, though? That's where the parents really...
Call him Maurice Wells.
So All or Nothing this week, episode 3, Michigan's show on Amazon Prime. The show which is supposed to showcase Michigan football. And it's definitely doing that. I don't think it's putting Michigan football in the light that Michigan was hoping. And the most amazing thing this week, I shouldn't even say that. There are a couple amazing things. But the funniest thing this week, Tom, and we both agreed on this one, was the opening scenes are from the Air Force game, I believe.
Yes.
And
yes.
So the entire Michigan offense is on the sideline, and they're talking to Harbaugh before they get ready to go out onto the field. And they're coming up with this. They're talking about a play or whatever, and Harbaugh tells Wilton, like, take the kill off, and this is all football speak, and Wilt, take the kill off, and reiterating that, and then as they're running out there, he yells it again at Wilt, don't kill, or whatever. And so Wilton Spate, gets under center, and the first thing he does, he looks up and he starts yelling, kill, kill, kill. And then the scene, the camera cuts to Jim Harbaugh, and he's like, damn it. And then the ball gets snapped, and it's audible to a draw play that gets tackled in the backfield for like 3 or 4 yards lost. And it was just so hilarious, and it was such I'd say microcosm, but maybe macrocosm of the season that Wilton Spate and the Michigan offense had last year.
Yeah, it was just hilarious because it very much seemed like Harbaugh had, or one of the offensive coaches up in the booth or something had seen something that Air Force was done to, try and bait Michigan into audibling into like a draw play. And Harbaugh's like, okay, well, we're one step ahead of them. Okay, don't step on this bear trap. Don't step on the bear trap. And he got up to the line and was like, ooh, pie. And then, and then you're in the bear trap. So yeah, that was just a absolutely hilarious 30 seconds. The episode on the whole was like, meh. It was fine. There was some other stuff in there that we can talk about, but that was by far. I was howling with laughter at that section.
The complete disconnect from 15 seconds ago, whatever you do, don't do this, to the first thing he does when he gets out there is he does it. Shannon, did you like that part?
Yeah, I definitely enjoyed that part. But the one I really loved was later on when I think they did a running play and Harbaugh's walking down the sideline saying, well, I guess we should have tried that earlier.
Jim Harbaugh is every person watching their team on Twitter. Run the dang ball!
A couple of other things that this was the second episode out of 3 where Jim Harbaugh has gotten into a pool in his khakis. This time he jumped off of, I don't know, 10-meter high dive. I don't know what it was for a cannonball contest. But, I mentioned a week or two ago that, I thought it would be very difficult to get out of khakis once they're wet. But, Tom, as much as he does this, either he's really good at it or it's pretty easy to get out of them.
Or he just keeps the same pair on all the time. I mean, we only see him in khakis, so it's
eventually,
possible
they dry eventually.
He jumps in a pool and then they air dry, and then he jumps in a pool again and then they air dry.
That's how he washes them.
That's how he washes them. Yeah.
I could speak to experience on this. When I was probably like 10 or 11, me and a bunch of friends, we'd always go to town, ride our bikes 2 miles into town, and go play basketball. Well, one day we go and steal a hog trough, and we're going to try
as one does.
We go steal a hog trough and put it in the creek in the back of town because we want to see how far we can sail. Maybe even sail to the Maumee River. Well, the 4 of us get into it, and immediately, because this is a flat bottom hog trough, immediately we flip over and we're all drenched and dumped into the water. So then at that point, we're like, well, what do we do now? Well, let's go play basketball. And so, I've got jeans and a sweater. And if you play enough basketball, you will eventually dry out. It doesn't matter. Sweater, jeans, socks, underwear. Not the underwear. The underwear does not dry. The rest of the stuff will dry, though. So just a tip. Anybody out there, if you do, you don't necessarily have to change clothes. They will dry. Body heat will help. Or just go shoot some baskets.
I think that what people listen to this podcast for more than the Buckeye Sports is the hog trough boating tips that you offer. So I think, listen, if we can't get 5-star reviews off of Gerd's hog trough boating in the crick, I'm not sure whether the hog trough or you using the word crick were more, oh, we grew up in different places, didn't we? Oh, but there were a couple moments in that story I was like, I can't relate to any of this.
To be fair, Crick is Turkey Foot Creek, but when you're referencing it as a place, it's Crick. I mean, that's the proper usage. And we had to plan this caper out because the hog trough was located on the side of an auto garage next to the town cop's house. So this is legit stuff.
This is like Northwest Ohio, rural Northwest Ohio, Ocean's 11. It sounds fascinating. Those are both pretty good Gerdisms. My favorite Gerdism though is gully washer for a good rain. I don't remember when you use that, but I still every once in a while when it's pouring, I'll think about gully washer and just laugh and laugh.
What else about this Michigan show?
Smooth transition. Speaking of gully washers.
Tariq Black getting hurt.
Yeah. Tariq Black, the sophomore, the freshman receiver, breaks his foot. And, Tom, they show Jim Harbaugh going to the hospital to see Tariq Black, and it's the most awkward thing. It's like just like when he was in the dorm room from the first episode or whatever. He gets into the hospital room, and it almost feels like the guy with the camera or the producer or the director is like, okay, action. And then Jim Harbaugh's like, so how's it going? It's just so unnatural and so odd, and it feels like both Black and Donovan Peoples-Jones, who were also there, were just like, please go.
I feel like we say this every week, but it's every time you watch Harbaugh trying to interact with just normal people, it's like you're watching a robot fail the Turing test. Like it's just he just, you know what he is? You remember last week when Pep Hamilton was on the headset and said to Wilton Speight, "Hey guys, you got to tell the guys we got to go win the game," and then Wilton Speight went over to the bench and said, "Hey guys, we got to win the game." Like Harbaugh needs Pep Hamilton on the headset to him saying, "Okay, and now you say, hey, how are you doing? Is your foot feeling better?" Like he needs someone in his head saying, you know, this is what a people would say right now.
He needs like wristbands, you know, like what would Jesus do? Like he needs like daily human interaction wristbands, like all the way up to his elbow.
I could just, you know, to his credit, he did not walk into that hospital room and just yell "kill, kill, kill." So I mean, he's ahead of Wilton Speight. So I mean, it's something.
Who was then after the Air Force game? Then they start to prepare for Michigan State week. Who was it that he had come in and talk to the team?
Jerry Hanlon,
yes.
Who was the quarterback coach under Bo, 1969 to 1991. So I think he might have had like 1 year a Moeller or something like that. He reminded. First of all, he had. We'll get to his best quote in a second.
Well, I already have it written down.
See, you and I, just one of us should watch this show because we just write down the same stuff. So I'll let you have the good quote, but he reminded me a little bit of Earl Bruce. Like he's the crusty old coach who they bring in to get you fired up on rivalry week, and like that was kind of Earl Bruce's role. For a number of years, at senior tackle, he'd come in and talk about the history of the rivalry and the importance of toughness and all that stuff. That seemed like that's what Jerry Hanlon's role is there at Michigan.
And yeah, go ahead. Tell me the quote that you think it was that you have.
"You don't know how hard it is to live in this state if you don't beat Michigan State," Jerry Hanlon said to a team that had lost 7 of the last 9 games to Michigan State and was about to lose to them for the 8th time in 10 years.
Oh, it was so funny because
if you don't know what it's like to lose to them, losing to them another time you're not going to learn anything now. Like it's like a dog getting sprayed by a skunk. If you haven't learned after the first time, it's just you're probably not going to happen. So you're never going to know what it's like to lose to Michigan State. Apparently,
Shannon, the better speech would be like, "You guys know what it's like to live in this state after losing to Michigan State."
Yeah, that one was kind of crazy. I just the way they're pumping up the whole. Was it what's that trophy called? Paul Bunyan or whatever.
The Paul Bunyan
Trophy.
Yeah,
it just was. I mean, if you can't get your team hyped up for the rivalry game and you lose, oh, that's right, it was raining. Sorry.
Sometimes that's
no spoilers, Shannon. That's next week. No spoilers.
Oh, darn it!
I did like it. I think it was towards the end of the show. Like they're getting maybe in the locker room before they head out onto the field, and I don't know if it was Harbaugh. I didn't write it down, but it's like smash on 3, 1, 2, 3, smash, and then I wrote down like Ron Howard voice, except they didn't.
All I do is
a Ron Howard. I would pay a lot of money for like an alternative track of Ron Howard narrating this series. That would be real good.
Anything else that you had on that episode, Tom?
I liked the defend the diag. That's kind of a fun. That's kind of a fun. They have, in case you're not watching along with us, during Michigan State week, Michigan State students sometimes come down and spray paint green paint on top of the the big block M on the diag, which is like their version of the oval, basically. So Michigan students have, it happened in 2014 is what they showed in the show. So since then, Michigan students camp out, like they set up like a tailgating tent and set up like couches and stuff and just camp out around this, like, the school seal on the diag there so that no one can come in and spray paint it. So that was kind of a cool thing. And they showed a couple players walking up and like having them explain to the players what was going on.
Escorted by producers.
Yes. No, Gerd, that was a natural interaction. That is how things happen normally.
Yeah, this all feels. There's a lot of forced and awkward like interaction between football players and normies. You know,
Chase Winovich going home. That whole like. Chase and last week I said Chase Winovich gets his haircut at exactly the kind of place that you would think Chase Winovich gets his haircut. This week I will say Chase Winovich lives in exactly the kind of house that you would think Chase Winovich lives in.
Are we just going to gloss over the aggression? What was her thing? Aggression solves everything, and Rashawn Gary just being terrible against Air Force in the first half, and them jumping all over him.
I think Don Brown is right. Aggression does solve everything. I think everybody knows that. But Gary, I can't fault somebody for struggling in the first half against the triple option, Tom.
Yeah, I mean that was I think the same week that Ohio State played Army. And I remember we did one of our Facebook Lives or something before the game, and I think we were watching that Michigan Air Force game, and basically saying, don't laugh at Michigan right now because the same thing's going to happen to Ohio State. Like, everyone just looks like a butt trying to defend the triple option for quite a while, and it's ugly, low-scoring slog. And so, yeah, everyone – the only person who should not get a pass for looking like crap during a game against a triple option service academy team is whoever scheduled the triple option service academy team. Don't schedule Army. Don't schedule Navy. Don't schedule Air Force. Don't do it.
It's one of my golden rules about college football. Don't do it. What if I was an AD? Even if the coach was like, "Hey, can we do this for the to honor the military?" I'm like, "No, honor the military on your own time, not on my time."
Play the Coast Guard Academy.
Right. Play Iowa Air Force from World War II. Yeah, we'll play those guys. We're not
Iowa pre-flight.
Thank you. Exactly. I'm not gonna, and I'm not even talking about getting into the whole defensive linemen getting cut blocks and stuff like that. I mean that's part of it and that's all of it. But it's such a range of what you have to do on defense, and then you look at the next week how that affects you as well. But that's a good summertime topic, Tom. Jot that down. We'll complain about that this summer. Anything else on All or Nothing, Shannon, that you had?
No, I think that's it.
Tom?
Nope, I'm good. I'm ready. I'm ready for the next one. I'm excited for the next question.
Yeah. Oh, what's the next? Oh, yes. Because this is something I put out on Twitter. I did a poll on Twitter. Who wins a Big Ten title first, Scott Frost or Jim Harbaugh? And my completely unbiased Twitter followers had it 83% Scott Frost. So, Shannon, I'll ask you first. Which one of those two wins a Big Ten title first?
Well, definitely Scott Frost.
Why?
Well, because he won a national championship last year.
Oh, well, that's true. You make a good point. Tom?
See, I'm going with Harbaugh. I'm playing the odds, and I'm going with Harbaugh based solely on this season because Frost is not going to win the Big Ten this year. They don't have the personnel. They could win the Big Ten starting next year. Next year might be the best opportunity a Big Ten West team has to win the Big Ten in quite a while because Ohio State's really going to be potentially rebuilding. Michigan's going to be, replacing Rashawn Gary. They could be replacing Shea Patterson, depending on how that all shakes out. Penn State's replacing Trace McSorley. The Big Ten East is a little more open next year than it has been. So that kind of opens the opportunity for a Big Ten West team to potentially make a leap. Can Joe Burrow lead the Cornhuskers to the Big Ten championship next year? Maybe. I don't know. Too soon to tell. No reaction from you guys. Gosh, you guys are.
I didn't want to interrupt you.
You're on a roll.
But this year, Michigan has the personnel to potentially make a run, especially if Shea Patterson ends up eligible. Michigan has the personnel to do it potentially this year. The schedule is not particularly favorable. They go to Michigan State. They go to Ohio State. They I think they have Penn State in Ann Arbor this year, but I think they also play Wisconsin and Notre Dame, which is not obviously going to impact their chances of winning a Big Ten. But they have the personnel, but they have a tough schedule this year. But maybe this is the year that he finally breaks through. If he does, then there's a pretty good chance that they win the Big Ten conference this year. So I went with Harbaugh based solely on this year. If it doesn't happen this year, I would switch my answer to Frost probably.
Yeah, I don't think it's so widely disparate between the two that it should be 83-17. I think Michigan's personnel is as good as, I can't say as good as Ohio State's, but good enough. But yeah, the schedule, even a game like at Northwestern, is going to be tricky for them. And then you've got the rivalry game at Rutgers where anything can happen. So we'll see how that goes. Before we call it a day here, on the passing of Earl Bruce this past week, I tweeted about this, but over the years since I've been on the beat in the press box, Earl Bruce would sit behind me, one row up, at most games, and was always reacting to plays, good or bad, would cuss a little bit here and there when things weren't going well, would get excited when they were going well, and I retweeted one of those instances from maybe 2013 or 2014 where Ohio State was leading 48-0 against Illinois, and Illinois scored a touchdown towards the end, and Earl Bruce's exact quote was, "You hate to see that." And he was just always just engaged and was a Buckeye all the way. Tom, I don't know, was he ever healthy enough to be up there when you were there this year?
I didn't see him this year. I when I was on the beat before, kind of early 2000s, mid 2000s, I would see him up there a decent amount. And then John Perennis and I did a series of stories in 2005, I think. Must have been 2005, with Earl and Bo Schembechler. And John talked to Earl, and I talked to Bo. And just about the series and their most memorable games. We talked to Bo about 1969. We talked to Earl about 1987, and put together a whole series on that. And that's just one of the things I've enjoyed doing more than just about anything else. That's just one of the cooler projects I've had a chance to be a part of. And Earl wasn't Woody, but Earl was Ohio State football for a long period of time. He played here. He was an assistant under Woody, came back as a head coach, and then, got fired and coached at Colorado State a little bit after that, but really made his home in Columbus after that. Was a fixture on local media. Was after Woody's passing, he really was kind of the grizzled old face of Ohio State football.
The ambassador.
Yeah. And he's more so than John Cooper, who still lives here and was coach longer than Bruce was. Coop has been a lot more low key. As a public persona, you still see him around town. You see him in the press box all the time, but Earl was always the guy who was out there talking about Ohio State football. He was the guy at senior tackle, getting the guys fired up for the Michigan game. He is, there have been guys like that. Now I'm blanking on the name of the assistant coach who was an assistant coach for a million years, Esko Sarkisian or Sarkinen. Yeah, Esko Sarkinen. He was that guy for a long time, and he's gone. Now Earl's gone. You're really losing a really important and powerful piece of the program with his passing. That's I think everyone sort of saw the headline. It was, guy who coached a while ago dies, but he I think represented something pretty significant to an awful lot of people who may not have even seen him coach at Ohio State, but he still sort of represented Ohio State football in a lot of ways.
He definitely did that, because even under Jim Tressel, like thinking of Michigan week, generally game weeks we would talk to players 2 or 3 times and coaches 2 or 3 times. There'd be like 2 or 3 availabilities throughout the week. Michigan week, there's one availability, and it's on Monday. And you get the players, you get some coaches. You would also get Earl Bruce, and he would sit and talk with you. And even under Urban, I think we would also get Earl would be around, but he was always. There'd be times with Urban, like every the Monday luncheons, Earl would be there to sit down, and you could just start talking to him about whatever, and you'd be like, Coach, do you think how do you think that it's going to go this week? And he'd be like, I don't know. He'd start having this coach's pessimism, basically, like, if they don't do this and they don't do that, then they're going to get this kicked, and then they're going to get that kicked, so they better do this. And just a really a valuable ambassador for Ohio State sports. And like you said, Tom, you're losing them, and you wonder who is that guy now that is this basically a living legend, and they're fewer and farther between. Shannon, did you want to say anything about Earl?
Yeah, I just it was the one game that everybody remembers the most is when he was carried off after the Michigan win, and then all of a sudden the Michigan product or paid product of Cooper took over. But it was nice to know that after what happened with them letting Earl Bruce go, him being able to come back, one of the few people to dot the I, and you figured the last 4 national championships that Ohio State has had, he's had his fingerprints on by being assistant coach to Woody Hayes for the, I think it was 68 and 70, or I forget what years off the top of my head, but and then the Tressel, because he was a disciple of him, and Meyer was part of his coaching tree. And then you have to think that I believe it was 11 out of the last 15 national championships he's had his fingerprints on, with Nick Saban being part of a coaching tree, Pete Carroll. And I mean, that's just phenomenal things right there. And when you heard Urban Meyer say, he coached the right way, and that's the one thing that you took away from learning from him, and that's the way we all want to coach. It means something, and they lost a legend. And I mean, I always kind of hoped that I would be able to see him around the stadium, but unfortunately it didn't happen. So my bucket list didn't come true with meeting him.
Yeah, and he would have definitely talked to you, engaged you, and would have gotten you fired up about that day's game, because that's just what he does. And that's I was looking back on like my Twitter timeline. I was doing a search of Earl Bruce, and one of them that came up was Troy Smith. We talked to him a couple of years ago when he got his number retired. I believe we talked to him, and he said that was one of his favorite things about Michigan week is once Earl started talking, then it was real. You look forward to Earl firing the team up, and he would do that, come in, and like senior tackle used to be public, and he would get the entire crowd fired up. Everybody in the stadium that came that day. So yeah, he'll be missed, but there's a whole lot of memories that he leaves behind. And we still have those, and public celebration for him at St. John Arena, where plenty of people will have the opportunity to pay their respects and say their goodbyes. So with that, we will say our goodbye. Thank you for listening. Make sure to check out the rest of the shows on the Ozone Radio Network. Mondays with Buckeye Sleepcast. And we've got sometimes Sons of Schmidt on Tuesdays. We are on Wednesdays, sometimes Fridays. You got Shannon with Silver Bullets Thursdays. And just thanks for tuning in. Make sure to check us out on iTunes as well, or whatever platform you're on. Subscribe, like, comment, tell your friends, tell your coworkers, tell your enemies. And we will talk to you next week.
Well, she threw away the motel key. I wish it never meant nothing to me. Say you will, now say you will. Oh yeah. Say you will, now say you will. If you tell me that tomorrow's alright, we could steal a car and leave